The Sunday Star-Ledger reports today that reputed Mafia godfather Carmine Galante may have been murdered for trying to get a piece of the action in Atlantic City. The newspaper says Galante had planned a meeting with Philadelphia and South Jersey mob boss Angelo Bruno last Friday, just one day after Galante was shot to death in a Brooklyn restaurant. Bruno had reportedly told Galante he was not welcome in Atlantic City, and law enforcement officials felt an underworld confrontation was brewing.
Speculation continues that reputed mob chieftain Carmine Galante may have been ready to take a step into Atlantic City and a step on the toes of another prominent underworld family. It was that reported aggressiveness that may have led to Galante's execution-type slaying in Brooklyn last week. Jack Connedy has more.
Did Carmine Galante have an eye on Atlantic City? State law enforcement officials say they're not sure, but they're ready to consider the possibility that Galante was murdered for being too aggressive, for wanting a piece of the prostitution action in Atlantic City, action controlled by the Angelo Bruno crime family in Philadelphia. Paramus Detective Thomas Delaney, who spent a year undercover investigating the mob, believes that. And he says intelligence reports indicate that Galante and Bruno had been meeting to discuss Atlantic City before Galante's death.
Based on intelligence reports that Mr. Galante was in Atlantic City looking to take a percentage, and in my estimation, a very big percentage. At this point in time, I think that there's so many pieces of pie, and I think Galante overate, and they cut out his appetite.
Delaney says Galante's killing would have had to have been approved by a number of Mafia family bosses.
I think if you look at organized crime, again, relating it to a business, that this was the head of one of the largest companies, so that they're going to get the message loud and clear. I don't think you're going to find a gang war. You're not going to find bodies all over the place. This was one level where a guy really overstepped his bounds, and they stopped him.
But it's not likely to stop the growth of prostitution in Atlantic City. Officials admit it's a problem. This videotape, taken last year, shows streetwalkers on the eve of the casino opening. But what was mostly freelance then is getting bigger, more organized, and moving indoors. New Jersey law enforcement officials can't confirm Delaney's theories, but they admit that he's knowledgeable, and the facts he's given hold up. One highly placed state police investigator who says he's intrigued by Delaney's details of the Atlantic City Galante connection said in his own words, "It sure sounds like he knows what he's talking about." In Newark, I'm Jack Connedy.
Reputed Philadelphia mob boss Angelo Bruno is wanted in New Jersey. A warrant for Bruno's arrest has been issued by the State Commission of Investigation. The SCI wants Bruno to testify in its investigation into organized crime. The warrant is dated October 24th to give Bruno time to voluntarily appear for questioning, but Bruno's appearance may be in doubt. The SCI will, by law, only be in business through the end of this year, and Bruno's lawyer is quoted as telling an SCI investigator that Angelo Bruno might not be back in town by then. Reputed organized crime boss Angelo Bruno will appear before the State Commission of Investigation. That's the word from Bruno's Philadelphia attorney. The SCI, which is looking into organized crime in the state, had issued a warrant for Bruno's arrest that went into effect today. But that warrant was canceled this afternoon after word came Bruno will appear next week. And reputed Philadelphia organized crime boss Angelo Bruno appeared before the State Commission of Investigation in Trenton today, but apparently refused to answer any questions. Twice during the day, Bruno was taken to a Superior Court judge to explain why he would not talk. Bruno didn't say much as he entered the SCI building earlier in the day, but from the comments he did make, it was evident he wasn't happy having to testify. Bruno is the reputed head of organized crime operations in both South Jersey and Philadelphia, and SCI investigators think he has a lot to say. Late this afternoon, Bruno and his attorney left the courthouse and headed for home. There's no word on what happened inside the judge's chambers, but we've been told Bruno is scheduled to make another appearance before the SCI sometime soon. Angelo Bruno, the man who reportedly has strong organized crime connections throughout South Jersey and Philadelphia, will be back before the State Commission of Investigation tomorrow. Bruno is hardly a stranger to that board. He has been under SCI subpoena since 1970. In his last appearance, he refused to answer any questions. But when he appears tomorrow, he will be under a court order to answer at least some of the board's inquiries. The SCI operates under a shroud of secrecy, but published reports link Bruno with the testimony of Charles Allen, a former mob hitman turned informant. We reported earlier Angelo Bruno, the reputed mobster leader, was back before the State Commission of Investigation today, and this time he was apparently answering questions. Kent Manahan has the story.
Angelo Bruno was once again mobbed by reporters, and as usual, he wasn't doing much talking. You want to not talk to us? But apparently he was in a mood to talk to the SCI commissioners, as he later indicated to us on the way out of today's session.
I told you once before, as far as I'm concerned, you can come in, listen to everything. As long as they okay it, you have my okay, because there's nothing I have to hide.
Today's testimony was conducted in secret and was over in about 3.5 hours. Bruno, who allegedly runs organized crime in Philadelphia and South Jersey, was before the SCI last month in a lengthy session. He refused to answer certain questions and was ordered to appear in Superior Court twice in the same day, where he was threatened with jail if he continued his silence. Bruno has been under an SCI subpoena since 1970 and has been talking on and off to the commission during those years under a grant of immunity from prosecution. Chairman of the State Commission of Investigation, Michael Sayavage, explains that means only the information given by Bruno is immune from prosecution.
In other words, only the information that the witness is giving us about a particular crime is immunized. He could still be charged by another agency, for instance, for that crime, as long as we haven't told them that information.
Sayavage added the SCI is getting important information by talking to Bruno.
I think there's various possible alternative accomplishments. One's already been accomplished with Mr. Bruno in Atlantic City, for instance. One hope is that he will give us information that will lead to an in-depth investigation on a particular facet of New Jersey life and how it's affected by organized crime.
Angelo Bruno is scheduled to be back before the SCI sometime after the first of the year. An exact date has not yet been set. In Trenton, I'm Kent Manahan.
Philadelphia police still don't know who gunned down reputed mob boss Angelo Bruno last night outside his South Philadelphia home. Bruno's murder came just a few days after his appearance before the New Jersey Commission of Investigation, where he was questioned about his alleged ties with organized crime in South Jersey. We have two reports. First, Susan Eastloss.
It's fairly quiet along Snyder Avenue right now, but last night around 10 p.m., the scene here in front of Angelo Bruno's house was very different. Police say the 69-year-old reputed organized crime boss was about to get out of his car just outside his home when two unidentified men approached from behind and opened fire. Bruno, well known in the Philadelphia, South Jersey area for many years, was found slumped in the passenger seat, bleeding profusely from a bullet wound in back of his right ear. Today, neighbors described what they saw and their fears now that he's dead.
He just had his head back and his mouth open and his face was covered with blood. And that's how he was standing from the front, and that's all you could see. And that's the way they left him for like an hour and a half. Then when they took him out, they just covered his face with an undershirt and carried him out. I guess he was kind of like a hero around here. The big thing, I guess, was that he would never be involved in drugs around this neighborhood. And now people are wondering, you know, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a lot of drug traffic around here now?
While detectives guarded Bruno's home to prevent any more violence, friends and relatives quietly filed inside to pay their respects, making it quite clear they wanted to mourn in private.
Family would appreciate it if you leave. It'd be very nice.
Okay. All right? Yeah.
No, we're not trying to be disrespectful.
Well, it is disrespect. Please.
Police refused to talk about the slaying on camera, but according to one officer who patrols this beat regularly, I don't know how it could have happened. He was always so careful to have two bodyguards with him. Last night, though, there was only one along, and since he was slightly wounded during the attack, it's doubtful he could have provided much protection. In South Philadelphia, I'm Susan Eastloss.
I'm Jeffrey Hall. Angelo Bruno was born in Sicily in May 1910. His surname was Annalore, but the family dropped it after emigrating to the United States when Angelo was a year old. Bruno's parents settled in Philadelphia, where they operated a small grocery store. Not much is known about Angelo's childhood, but it is known that he attended South Philly High but didn't graduate. Bruno's first brush with the law came when he was 18 years old. He was arrested for reckless driving. Then, in 1935, police found a still in Bruno's father's grocery store, charged young Angelo with bootlegging, but he was acquitted. Investigators continued to follow Bruno throughout his life, but never really came up with anything solid. His cover was blown in 1963 when a New York Mafia turncoat named Joe Valachi sang to police and told them Bruno headed the Philadelphia South Jersey crime family. Suddenly, Bruno became a prime target of federal investigations into organized crime. Police believe his big money came from illegal gambling and that he controlled the purse strings for nearly 1,000 subordinates. But Bruno eventually went legitimate. He bought legalized casinos in London and the Caribbean. He bought a hotel, a trucking company, a vending business. He became a millionaire. Later, Bruno ran into trouble with the New Jersey State Commission of Investigation for refusing to testify. For the first time in his life, he went to jail. In 1973, he was released from Yardville Reformatory after spending a year and a half there. He got out for medical reasons, but in 1976, he was threatened with prison again if he continued his silence. In 1977, Bruno finally testified, but investigators weren't satisfied. In recent months, he continued to appear before the SCI, but never told the commission all it wanted to hear, never coming even close. Last December, reporter Kent Manahan caught up with Bruno in Trenton before an SCI hearing and asked if she could listen.
As far as I'm concerned, you can come in. As long as they okay, you have my okay, because there's nothing I have to hide.
At the time of Bruno's death last night, it's believed the SCI was preparing to send him to court Monday to try and get an order forcing him to talk, once again under the threat of jail. Reportedly, the commission wanted to know about several mob murders and about Bruno's alleged business activities in Atlantic City. But as Bruno always said, he'd die before he'd ever talk about his reported links with crime. The irony of all this is that somebody apparently wanted to make sure Bruno made good on that promise. I'm Jeffrey Hall.
Still no word on who murdered reputed South Jersey crime boss Angelo Bruno Friday night. Bruno was shot outside his South Philadelphia home just a few days before the State Commission of Investigation in Trenton was going to bring him to court to try to make him talk about his alleged business dealings in Atlantic City. Today, police became more convinced that the motive behind the shooting had to do with control in Atlantic City, which mob family would do business there. For now, the bets are on Philip Testa, Bruno's right-hand man, who had been feuding with Bruno at the time of his death. Bruno's funeral is set for Wednesday.
And as many as 1,000 people are expected to attend Wednesday's funeral for organized crime boss Angelo Bruno. Authorities also say they expect members of other organized crime families to show up. Meanwhile, police report there are still no leads in the Friday night gangland slaying. Authorities said today Bruno's driver has given at least 3 different versions of the shooting. And we have this late report. Angelo Bruno may have been killed by a murder-for-hire team from Hoboken. Underworld sources have told United Press International the team may also be responsible for as many as 18 other hits in the area. Paramus Detective Joseph Delaney told UPI the FBI is currently investigating the hit team and its connections to the Bruno murder. The mother of South Jersey and Philadelphia was buried today. Last Friday night, 2 shotgun blasts ended Bruno's life on the street in front of his house in South Philadelphia. And this morning, more than 1,000 people crowded around a small church just a few blocks away. Steve Taylor was there.
A wall of curious faces gave way reluctantly when the heavy bronze coffin arrived at the Church of the Epiphany of Our Lord. Inside, about 250 relatives, friends, and associates waited for the remains of Angelo Bruno. The funeral was private. The 1,000 or so people outside, many from the neighborhood, had nearly an hour to think about the Mafia and about the ways men can die.
Last year, there were 2 mob-style killings which may be related to the Bruno shooting. Carmine Galante was murdered in the garden of a Brooklyn restaurant, and Anthony Little Pussy Russo died near his Monmouth County office. Some informers say these shootings had to do with a mob dispute over control of Atlantic City.
The same sources say Bruno was shot by 2 hitmen from an organization in Hoboken hired by the New York mob. But there have been no arrests, and police say they haven't got any suspects. After the funeral, Bruno's widow and children were the first to come out. Among the many mourners who followed were Rosario and Giuseppe Gambino, cousins of the late New York crime boss Carlo Gambino. Just last week, the Gambino brothers were charged with drug trafficking in New Jersey. There were 30 limousines in the funeral procession, and they were joined by dozens of other cars for the half-hour drive to the cemetery, where Angelo Bruno was buried in a family plot. In Yeadon, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia, I'm Steve Taylor.
Crime news has long been a central feature of the American press, traced at least to the turn of the century when editors discovered that sensational crime stories sold newspapers. Surely, news coverage has become more balanced and sophisticated over the years. But the media are still criticized for reporting too much news of crime. I secretly suspect, however, that public curiosity would not have it otherwise. Yet on occasion, even the more curious among us must be repulsed by the prominent display of brutality. Sometimes the media report far more than we need to know about an especially gruesome and sensational murder. For example, the recent slaying of reputed underworld figure Angelo Bruno of Philadelphia, photos of which found their way as far north as the normally sedate Sunday Record of Bergen County. On page 1, no less, appeared a close-up picture of the victim, his head slung back over the front seat of his car, mouth ajar and blood spattered, with an unidentified onlooker peering through the windshield. An ugly reminder of underworld life, no doubt, but my stomach flip-flopped nonetheless. Do we need such vivid journalism any time, but especially with Sunday breakfast? What purpose does such obvious sensationalism serve? The Trenton Times, published closer to the scene, also displayed a photo of the victim, as did New Jersey Nightly News. But a couple days later, Times editor Robert Bentley had second thoughts and admitted in print that his paper blew it. His words, not mine. In an apology to readers, Bentley wrote, and I quote, "About the only available dodge is that usage of the photograph was a dramatic way to emphasize the presence of the mob and its violence. But even that won't wash," end quote. I agree with Mr. Bentley. This is Richard Hickson.
A grand jury investigating the murder of South Jersey organized crime boss Angelo Bruno may have a new lead. A report in today's Philadelphia Daily News says a retired delicatessen operator with possible mob ties may have met with two men suspected of planning the March 21st slaying. Joseph Laziano has reportedly been ordered to testify because he was photographed at the home of Bruno's cousin, John Simone, along with Bruno associate Philip Testa, the day after the murder. According to the Daily News, Simone has taken over Bruno's position as family leader.
Philadelphia and southern New Jersey may have a new crime boss, a new boss of bosses to succeed the late Angelo Bruno. The Philadelphia Inquirer says today that man is Philip Testa, 56 years old, and described by police investigators as the meanest and best equipped of all Bruno's former associates. That to survive the fight for Bruno's job. Testa was an underboss in the Bruno family, the man who controlled loan sharking and gambling activities for the family. Bruno was murdered in his car in March, and many sources have said it was linked to a struggle for the control of gambling rackets and other potential mob interests in Atlantic City. Authorities are said to have photographs of a number of top crime figures in Philadelphia going in and out of a downtown restaurant there, where it's believed they pledged their loyalty to the new boss.
A theory by state crime investigators has just surfaced into the death of former Philadelphia crime boss Angelo Bruno. Last month, Bruno was gunned down as he sat in a car outside his South Philadelphia home. At that time, authorities believe Bruno was killed because of a dispute with other crime families trying to muscle their way into Atlantic City. Today, the executive director of the State Commission of Investigation says he believes Bruno's death was caused by an internal conflict within Bruno's own organization, and that Atlantic City was only a jewel to be captured as a result of that fight. A witness who identified himself as a former mob hitman took the stand for the State Commission of Investigation today. He testified about kickbacks from a union prepaid dental plan, kickbacks which allegedly found their way into the pocket of the late Philadelphia crime boss, Angelo Bruno. Mary Amoroso has the story.
The witness testified behind a bulletproof glass barrier, wearing a black hood and surrounded by federal marshals. He identified himself as Charles Allen, a mob associate who turned informant and helped convict mob members on arson and narcotics charges. Today, Allen told how the late crime boss Angelo Bruno ordered a South Jersey union official, Ralph Natale, to use a certain consulting firm in setting up a prepaid dental plan. That firm was Rittenhouse Consulting Enterprises of Cherry Hill. Allen said Rittenhouse's president, Larry Smith, made regular cash payment kickbacks to union official Natale.
Oh, just once in a while, Larry would come and hand Ralph an envelope, and Ralph would always be happy to get an envelope, and he'd say, "That's my man." And then when we would leave, Ralph would, take the money out and count it.
And there was a hierarchy to this kickback scheme, Allen said, because Ralph Natali, in turn, would make payments to Angelo Bruno. Earlier in the day, Rittenhouse President Smith denied an SCI allegation that he skimmed more than $150,000 from the dental plan.
Absolutely not. Didn't you give part of that cash, or all of that cash, to Raymond Long John Mortarano? Absolutely not. I don't even know the individual.
Later, George Franconero, a former law partner of Governor Byrne, testified about his role in a dental plan for North Jersey Teamsters and clerical workers. Testimony continues tomorrow, and later in the day, the SCI is expected to make recommendations for legislation to curb dental plan abuses. In Trenton, I'm Mary Amoroso.
According to a report in the Chicago Tribune, the nation's organized crime families have agreed that East Coast mobsters will control Atlantic City's rackets. The newspaper said the agreement was reached 13 months ago during a meeting of 7 of the country's 9 organized crime families in Philadelphia. The report said Chicago mobsters were given control of Las Vegas racketeering operations in return for their promise to stay out of Atlantic City's mob activities. And federal authorities, the Tribune said, believe the murder of alleged Philadelphia crime boss Angelo Bruno was an outgrowth of that meeting.
Former bartender from South Jersey was arrested today in connection with the shooting death of a union figure with alleged ties to the Philadelphia mob. 31-year-old Willard Moran of Clementon was picked up at his home today after a tip from the Philadelphia law enforcement officials. They allege Moran was involved in the shooting of John McCullough, the powerful head of the Philadelphia Roofers Union local. He was gunned down in his kitchen on December 16th of last year. McCullough was a longtime friend of slain Philadelphia mob boss Angelo Bruno and was influential in Atlantic City labor affairs as well.
Oh, he is taking my picture, Dad.
All right, off the steps. Everybody up the steps. Everybody up the steps.
Well, let the camera go. Respect the family. On here, would you please? Over here.
I'm sorry. My guys, cameras that are going to fall. Get out of the way. Oh, run him over. I'm right behind you. Keep quiet on that. Thank you. Well, you gotta make those fingers first. All right, let's move it. Right behind. This can you lean into the door? Push me on, I'm done. Go somewhere else. Then you're on. Get back. Come on, let's move it, man. Get the people on. Come on, let's go. Let's go, man. Let the family out, will you? Come on, move it back. I'm letting them out. I'm letting them out. Oh, we got limousines on load here. Come on.
side. Get on that side over there.
Move it back. Let me on top of the car. Move it back. Over there like everybody. Get over there like Come on. Well, let's go back out of the way. We got cars all over here. Move it back.
People get back, please. Turn around. Turn around. Let's go, fellas. Give us a break. Will you please let them convicts fall? This guy better free yourself out, man. Don't worry. Okay. People get back, please. Turn around. Let's go, fellas. Give us a break. Will you please let them convicts fall? This guy better free yourself out, man. Don't worry. Okay. Yo, it's a pit.
Go! Go! Get back. Where's your bag? I'm going to sit back there. Nice to meet you, fellas. Come on, Here goes Gina. Let's go. Get a man on the other side of that car. Keep those windows clear. Come on, she's all right. Mike, get in the back. Come on, just step back. I thought step in the back. Mark, right in the car, Mark.